Sharper Point Commentary, presented by Schwartz Laser Eye Center.
Like you, I've been in my share of group chats, and probably like you, they generally drive me nuts. I was in a chat with some guys I'd been jamming with for years, which I loved because I love those dudes. Until, well, things got political, and I had to tell my buds, I love you, but I have to talk about that stuff at work, so I have no desire to spend my free time talking about politics, even where I agree with you. The latest annoying group chat I was added to involved a bunch of people at my dojo. It was started by my sensei, who was letting everybody know that he was feeling ill and wouldn't be teaching class, something I haven't been able to participate in because of a shoulder injury that led to surgery a month ago. So I wanted to exit the chat because it was reminding me I couldn't train for my brown belt right now. But because my sensei's an older gentleman and I actually worry about his health, I stayed in the chat so it wouldn't appear that I don't care. I don't know how I'd react if I were added to a chat that discusses war plans, but my first thought wouldn't be, I gotta get out of this place. Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, says he was inadvertently added into a group chat on the Signal app that included Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Vice President JD Vance, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, along with the National Security Advisor, discussing how and when the U.S. military would attack the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth took exception to Goldberg's description of the chat.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again.
Hegseth wasn't denying that Goldberg had been added to the chat, but instead, as ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers explained this morning, Hegseth was saying
nobody was texting war plans. I think he was, responding to a specific thing in this report yesterday about what he was doing the morning of the strikes on Yemen.
But still, do you want any journalist added to any chat that's taking place between people who have such high levels of security clearance? Senator Mark Kelly told CNN he don't think so.
This was about a operational mission. It's just incredibly sloppy, but it's also dangerous. If information on a strike against Yemen would leak out ahead of time, that could put the pilots that were conducting these strikes at risk.
He said he was especially shocked by the seemingly lax nature of the conversations, saying it sounded like the group was ordering a pizza. Kind of sounds like my old group chat with my buds. I'll ask this question again, though. Do we want any journalist added to any chat that's taking place between people who have such high levels of security clearance? I'll answer that question this way. Before I went to Iraq as an embedded journalist, Geraldo Rivera managed to get himself kicked out of the country because he drew maps in the sand on camera that showed what he believed to be the path the U.S. Marines were taking to Baghdad during the invasion, a couple years before I was even there. After I survived a bombing west of Taimyr, Iraq, I decided to not take pictures of the places the Humvees that we were riding in sustained damage because the first sergeant that was riding along with us, who, by the way, was very scary, asked me not to because he believed it would put future soldiers and Marines in danger. And that's what's really most important first for me. I'm an American first. Journalist second.
Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic magazine, says he was inadvertently added to a group chat that included Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, the Vice President and Secretary of State, discussing how and when the U.S. military would attack Houthi rebels in Yemen.
ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers joins us now to talk about this. And Karen, despite Hegseth denying Goldberg's claim...
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again.
You and many others are reporting that the White House is saying this appears to be authentic, right?
Yeah, the White House put out a statement yesterday from the National Security Council saying that, confirming the authenticity of this thread and said that they're reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain. Hegseth, though, said yesterday that nobody was texting war plans. I think he was, responding to a specific thing in this report yesterday about what he was doing the morning of the strikes on Yemen. But Goldberg last night said that Hegseth can say it wasn't a war plan, but he says it was a minute-by-minute accounting of what was about to happen. essentially saying he has receipts of that. And in his piece yesterday, you can read this, he says he didn't publish that part of it because it was a national security risk, a potential risk to military and intelligence personnel in the region if he published what Hegseth was messaging on the Signal app that morning, hours before the attack.
One can imagine that the investigation into how this happened is probably pretty intense. Any indication from the White House that heads are going to roll?
Not yet from the White House. They're saying very little on this. The president yesterday said he didn't know about the story, but just said he wasn't a fan of the Atlantic. We hopefully will see him this afternoon for a photo op, and we'll see if he takes more questions on this. There is no White House briefing today. But on Capitol Hill, there are a lot of questions about this and calls for an investigation. And coincidentally, there was already a previously scheduled hearing today where the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA Director will be up there. And you can imagine they're going to get grilled about this.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
We're both on the chat.
Oh, yeah. And I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of talk about using secure channels to discuss this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, Signal is an app that's publicly available. I have it. Many people in D.C. have this. Just as another way to text people, whether it's messages, WhatsApp, Signal. It's just another type of app like this. It also has a disappearing function where you can erase the messages after 24 hours or a week, whatever you want to set it to. And that's raising questions, too, about why they were using this. Was it so it could disappear? That then isn't in compliance with records rules that you have to do as when you're in the administration. So for things for the archives. So a lot of questions still about this, and right now the White House hasn't provided answers.
White House correspondent Karen Travers with us. What have you heard about the possibility that the president's tariffs that are expected to go into effect will be more targeted and maybe narrower than what he said they would be in the past?
That's what we're hearing right now. These tariffs are scheduled for April 2nd. Circle that date on your calendar. We're hearing that they could be less sweeping than what he had threatened, but I think the important thing to note is that this is all very fluid. It is still very much in the works, according to White House officials. But anything that he puts into effect next week would be a significant increase and could likely have an impact on American consumers and businesses. But it's not clear at this point what countries are going to be targeted and what rates these tariffs will be set for.
All right. Thanks a lot, Karen. That is ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.